This podcast is for education and information purposes only. It is not a substitute for professional medical advice. Welcome to the Motherhood Clinic, a podcast about caring for mothers after childbirth, led by clinical experience and real-life stories. If you're a new mum and ever asked yourself, is what I'm going through normal? Should I be worried? Or who should I ask for help? Then this podcast is for you. It's for anyone navigating those early weeks, months, or even years after having a baby. Each episode brings together voices from across the motherhood journey, from clinicians, experts, and mothers from all walks of life. We're here to help you feel more empowered in your unique motherhood journey. We believe in a better start to motherhood.
Today on the Motherhood Clinic, I have the pleasure of speaking with Nancy Best. Nancy Best is a qualified personal trainer and the founder of leading online female fitness community, Ladies Who Crunch. She's been hired by some of the world's biggest brands and blue chip companies, including Amazon and Google, to help boost employee well-being. Her mission is to help women use exercise as a tool for holistic health instead of aesthetics. She's regularly quoted across national and lifestyle media as a women's strength training expert. Thank you for joining us, Nancy.
Thank you so much for having me.
This is episode 6 of the Motherhood Clinic. And what we're doing in these conversations is having discussions with a range of people, everyone involved in that motherhood journey, around lessons to learn, things they can take inspiration from, and where to go from here.
Yeah.
Let me talk a bit about how we first met. Yeah. We met through a common friend, Charlotte Brown,
Indeed.
Who was actually our very first podcast guest.
Like you.
Yeah, and she introduced me to you. And why I'm interested in chatting is your focus around exercise and yoga, and particularly postnatal yoga, which is where would be a relevance for our audience. So I'll let you speak in a moment about exactly what you do. The landscape for today's conversation will be looking at, I think, 2 broad areas that we've discussed, which is why is exercise important, and particularly in the women's health space, and what relevance that has people that have just had a baby and how they might want to do that. And then secondly, there's a ton of information out there, good, bad, probably ugly, that you're probably seeing in from people coming into your world. And a bit of what would be really helpful, I think, is to do a bit of that myth busting.
Totally.
To work from there. How does that sound to you?
Sounds
Good?
Great. Thanks for having me.
Thank you.
So, yes, Charlotte is a member of my community, Ladies Who Crunch, which is a platform for female fitness and well-being, and a big portion of those members are pre and postnatal, over 40%. And essentially my sort of expertise area has really evolved to have a big focus on pre and postnatal fitness and well-being. And unfortunately the industry is still trapped, I think, in the kind of aesthetic relationship with exercise for particularly mothers. You know, most women come to movement pre and postpartum as a way to kind of manage the way they look. And I think what is really exciting and a huge opportunity is to help women understand the much bigger holistic why behind exercise. And I think that's something that is slowly starting to be understood, but we're quite far behind, I think, still on that. And conversations that I have, you know, in my network, in my client base, I think women are still really under pressure to look a certain way, and kind of the bounce back post-baby, mum-tum, all of that language is so negative that it sort of clouds, I think, you know, some of those bigger reasons that I would love to talk to you about today, because I think it really helps to solidify and hopefully kind of ignite passion for movement in a different way at a time in your life where time is precious. There's a lot of noise on, you know, what you should do, what you shouldn't do. All of that kind of thing is tough to navigate. But I think exercise is such a powerful tool to have in, you know, in the toolbox for resilience and kind of overall well-being.
Excellent. Thank you for that intro. And I think also to give a bit of colour to the work that you've done, you know, when we were looking about the work people you've worked with, you know, you've held workshops with the likes of Google, you've got an existing base of people that come to you regularly, and you've also done some feature things. So you've had exposure, I think it's fair to say, across quite a broad segment of women coming in, like from all walks of life, from different personas,
Totally.
right? So talk to me a bit about, I guess, the breadth of people you come across in
Yeah.
this world, and
Yeah.
then we can dive into a bit of like more of the why.
Totally.
Yeah.
So my, you're right. My ethos as a practitioner and Ladies Who Crunch as a brand is all about inclusivity.
Yeah.
So women of all ages, of all fitness levels, and I think that, you know, again coming back to kind of challenges for women, I think although fitness is evolving and there are becoming more and more options available to different profiles of women, it still is quite a cliquey industry, and particularly if you've had a long break, whether that is because of having children or just losing your flow. You know, in your 20s, a lot of women find, you know, they come into the corporate world and, you know, routine kind of goes out the window. The majority of sort of gym spaces are still pretty male dominated. So although I find, you know, as you say, I have worked and connected with women of all different profiles. I think there's some common themes that I hear a lot, which is, you know, feeling a little bit unsure of what to do, what the right, you know, sources of information are, where to begin, feeling you know, some shame physically around, you know, certain parts of the body that perhaps they're not confident in. They feel, you know, they're looking on their phone and there's all these, you know, stunning influencers who are, you know, making it all look so straightforward and easy. You know, that just doesn't cohere with their life. So I think for anyone listening to this, kind of whatever your journey with exercise, take some comfort in the fact that, you know, from my experience as a coach, no matter what the profile is of a woman, we've actually often had very similar challenges as a, you know, as a kind of community.
And that's a really helpful lens for anyone listening, as you're saying, to come to the table around exercise, no matter where you're coming from. So let's bring it back to that initial question of why. So my outside observation is everyone generally has a view of why exercise is good for them. And there's a ton of information out there that says, you know, we all know it's good for us, right? How do we try and distill down, in your viewpoint, what are the key things of all the information? Everyone knows it's good for you, we should exercise, we should eat well, etc., blah, blah, blah. But it almost becomes like wallpaper because everyone knows this. So how would, for you and in your experience, what do you think are the key things that people should take away as to why it's important, and especially for new mothers?
I want to start by saying, if you're listening to this and you have got a baby who is anywhere from 6 weeks to 6 months to a year old, you're probably rolling your eyes at the concept of you and I sitting here saying exercise is really good for you and you should really do it, because you've got this huge life-changing experience that you are living, and actually sort of us almost, you know, from an outsider sort of pontificating on the value of exercise can be quite sort of irritating. And I just want to acknowledge that, because I think it's something, again, that, you know, I'm really conscious of. It's a huge privilege to have the time and the sort of headspace, as you say, to like take these positive steps. So, you know, please don't listen to this and think you're failing in any way if you haven't started that journey, maybe at all, like pre or postnatally. But if you're listening and you feel that you are ready to start to think about that as something to add into your week, you know, your month even, just, you know, as a one-off to start with, the most powerful reasons to do it have got, like I said earlier, nothing to do with aesthetics and everything to do with the kind of chemical impact of exercise on your overall well-being. So we know from research that when anyone exercises, it actually changes the neuroplasticity of your brain. And what that means is it kind of connects the prefrontal cortex and processes that are happening. And that's really important for emotional regulation. So in that first year, 2 years of motherhood, when all of these seismic changes are happening, hormonally, emotionally, you know, your mental health is going through challenges. Even if you have a completely seamless transition in, you know, through your birth and your child sleeps 12 hours a night, there's still going to be challenges along the way. And it's amazing that we have this format that is available to us within our own bodies to help develop that resilience. And I think that, for me, is the most important reason that any mother or parent indeed should, consider exercise as a gift kind of back to yourself. I think the second thing, as you touched on, is, again, we all know exercise is really good for you, but the why of that is actually really powerful when you consider the choices that you make as a new parent in those first few years will have a seismic impact on what the end of your life with your children looks like.
Yes.
So when you become a grandparent, hopefully one day, if you're lucky enough for that cycle to come all the way back around, having your 60s, 70s, 80s, maybe even 90s, the foundations that you lay from a cardiovascular perspective, from a kind of muscle building perspective, bone density, all of those choices and those kind of bricks that you are laying are going to really hold you in good stead. And then the third reason, which is, something I mention a lot to women who are kind of grappling with their why around exercise, it's so important to remember that as a parent, you are the role model for your child and their relationship with themselves, their bodies, how they move. What does healthy look like?
Yes.
They are looking to you, and taking time for yourself and explaining to your child and showing them why you're doing this. It's not because mummy's had a fat day or daddy's got a dad bod. It's none of that. It's about taking time for yourself to renew the body, to build strength, all of that positive language.
Yes.
And really kind of helping your child to then enter their life with this incredible example. And I think whenever I ask people to reflect on their own parents and their own journey around movement, and I'd love to hear, Patrick, from your perspective with your family. And it's not throwing shade on the past, there was different challenges, different generations, but I do think, particularly for women with mothers who perhaps may have had, and I know in my own case, some complicated relationship with their own body and themselves. My mum had a long history with anorexia when she was growing up. I think that is something that can really impact, a child and being positive. And she and my dad have been an amazing set of role models for me, particularly my dad, who is very, very fit still now. I can train with him and he's 65, which is pretty amazing. But, it's just important to reflect on, even as a fully grown adult, I'm sure there are still some things perhaps that, you remember from your childhood around movement, or indeed maybe in your case, or anyone's case, there was no examples of exercise. There was no examples of your parents taking time for themselves and prioritising their health.
That's I'll pick up on 2 points that you mentioned. It was a very helpful context setting piece when you say what people draw from this conversation. This isn't meant to be two people lecturing people about what they should and shouldn't do. This is more hopefully inspiration and food for thought that might hopefully can be used as fuel to think about where you want to go in the future. So I think that's one thing. The second thing was about the reframing that you mentioned, which is how you view exercise. I certainly felt that as a new father, you feel a little bit guilty about spending time for yourself, right? The way you describe that as like a gift to yourself, I think is a helpful hook that people take on. Because sometimes people see the exercise as the chore, which is, I should be doing exercise. I know I'm meant to be doing it 2 times a week. And it's like, it's the last thing I want to do at the end of the day.
Yes.
I think everyone has a very unique relationship, as you said, with exercise. And I think it's that powerful reframing, which is an important anchor point, I think, for people to take. So that's just a more reflection on a couple of important points that you mentioned.
And when you talk about the chore element, I think that's a really good point to pick up on, because again, it's something I'm really passionate about. Exercise for so many people, because it's related to kind of changing your body and making yourself, smaller in some ways, slimmer, more, toned. Perhaps for men, it's more about, looking more bulky, whatever these kind of aesthetic goals. I think by definition, that's therefore sort of tied to a certain level of pain, of sacrifice, of sort of grim toil. Exercise actually has so many different formats, and finding something that you enjoy is so important to then finding consistency, because there is unfortunately, life things you do just have to do, like brushing your teeth, hopefully twice a day. People do that, because you have to, right? And it's not particularly enjoyable. You have to do it.
Yeah.
But exercise, I think, needs a rebrand, because there's so many different ways to move your body and lay, again, these positive habits, these positive associations. And when you have, and for some people, they do enjoy that sense of kind of sweating it out, really pushing themselves, 100 burpee challenges, high rocks, all that kind of thing. Brilliant.
Yeah.
But there's also lots of other ways to exercise that don't necessarily look like, you've just been in a water pit because, you're not drenched in sweat, but you've still done a really great bit of exercise. And I think that's also where there's perhaps a myth busting to be done around what good looks like and what is, fundamentally the most important tick boxes that everybody should try to do. But then within that, there is definitely variety and personal preference. Just like what I like eating and what you like eating is possibly going to be different. And it doesn't mean that either of us have got a better or worse diet. It's just about preference and sustainability in terms of habits.
Good. Now I think it's about finding what works for you. Some people like the pain and knowing that they've actually overcome a challenge in that sense of, oh, I've done something. And other people are like, I'm okay just doing like the 15-minute workout because I've just done something, it's consistent, and that's a win for me. And I think I'm saying it's about going on that journey to find what works for you. And it's very personal. So, to your question, I know that my relationship with exercise came from my dad and my brother. So he was always quite sporty. He used to do running, played table tennis. Tried to get us into table tennis, we rebelled. My brother and I would go running when we were kids and do like fun runs, like
Love that with your dad.
Yeah, with dad.
Yeah.
There's two of us, but then oh shit, he's gonna hear this. He was a faster and stronger one, and so he was
your brother or your dad?
My brother.
Okay.
Yeah.
Is he older or younger? Oh.
He would run on ahead. He knows the story. He would run on ahead. And then my dad would pick me up and put me on his shoulders and run ahead with me, so that at the last minute I could run ahead of him, and we always had a good laugh about that. I think for us, exercise was always fun. And
it's connection as a family.
I've been quite fortunate, I guess, that I've always associated with fun.
I think that's informed how you are raising your own family in terms of, are you trying to find ways?
100%.
Yeah, because I see with my coaching that people tend to go in two directions. So if they have had very negative examples in their upbringing, either completely absent, no exercise infrastructure whatsoever, or perhaps over exercising or over dieting, or lots of negativity around meal times and kind of learning from a young age about what's good food, bad food, all that kind of thing. When it comes to parenthood, they are really conscious about kind of changing the narrative and being very proactive. And then the second group of people like you who have really had a brilliant kind of example, and you almost don't even think about it. It's just so innate to you from your upbringing.
You're right.
There's not even a strategy. You're not consciously thinking, I want the children to know how to be strong and be powerful and use their bodies. It's just that's what you've learnt so well, and therefore it just naturally flows. But it's really interesting, I think, for those people who have had perhaps more challenging role models, or lack of. It's really important to know that you can reframe things. And there's a great, fresh start and fresh kind of blank sheet of paper available to you as a new parent to just rewrite what your family infrastructure looks like.
Good. And that's partly that. Well, that's why you exist, right? And Lady C Crunch and
to give people these tools. These tools, exactly.
Great. Let's move on to a conversation then about busting. There's so much influence out there around motherhood, parenthood, exercise. I talked previously with someone who's also very much into fitness, but he's doing something called the Dad Table. And we talked a lot about where people take their cues for fatherhood from, but equally there'll be where do you take your cues for exercise from, whether it's your friends and family, as you talked about, whatever you look at on social media. There's a lot of influence out there, and as you've mentioned, there's a lot of uncertainty, anxiety, and a need for reassurance as to what do I do. If I bring it back to conversations I've had with new mothers, they're like, I was really, I loved exercise beforehand, as one example. I've had my baby. I don't know when it's appropriate for me to go back.
Yeah.
Is that 6 weeks, 6 months, 12 months? I don't know.
Yeah.
So when I do have that 10-minute window, what am I meant to even be doing?
Yeah.
And am I safe to run, and etc. So it's more a reflection on, like, there's a lot of uncertainty out there, which I think can also then lead to a lot of these myths forming about what you should and shouldn't do.
Yeah.
Tell me a bit about what you're seeing from your people coming to you.
Yeah.
What are those big ugly myths, and where do they come from?
Yeah.
Well,
I think going back to the sort of pregnancy journey is a really good place to start, because that is when a lot of the myths start to propagate.
Okay.
So essentially, the NHS have a very light touch set of guidelines around prenatal exercise. Okay. And of course, every single woman's experience of pregnancy is unique.
Yep.
But the studies show that women who maintain the level of activity that they had before they conceived for as long as possible during their pregnancy have a better experience in labour, better recovery, and again, overall well-being markers are improved. So whilst there's quite a lot of judgment around women doing exercise with a clear bump, actually the research suggests that unless, it's not the time to completely start a totally new, very intense exercise regime that you've never done before. Yeah. If you haven't exercised for, let's say, 5 years previously. But if you are somebody who's very active and has been a runner, lifting weights, Pilates, yoga, with adaptations, there is absolutely no sort of safety issue there, as long as you are making those small changes. And just in brief, those include, you don't want to be lying prone on your tummy for extended periods of time, obviously. I mean, everyone knows that even when you come to sleeping, you're encouraged obviously to lie on your side at a certain point of your pregnancy. You do want to keep an eye on your temperature, so you don't want to get too hot, because your body temperature is already raised anyway, and you just need to be careful of, of any issues around that. And essentially, you're just kind of finding that, we talk about a lot in fitness about the RPE scale, so rate of perceived exertion, and you want to be no more than a 7. So 10 is the sort of top. You are pushing yourself. You're unable to talk. If you're doing 100 burpees. As a pregnant woman moving, 7 is your absolute max that you want to get to. And I think that's just really important as a tool to remind yourself that everybody's 7 is different, right, as well. So if you are somebody who has had a long history of distance running, of, cardiovascular activity, 7 is probably somebody else's 10, but that's your 7.
Okay.
So I think just, reminding people that it's safe to exercise. There's a lot of people who don't understand the science and are very worried about the baby and about development. Yeah. But actually, again, there is no research that exercise is dangerous as long as you are doing it, as I've said, with these kind of considerations in mind. If you've done no exercise during your pregnancy, that's also fine, right? There can be things like hyperemesis that can obviously, take over your life essentially and make it impossible to do anything, let alone any exercise. And then it's quite comical because you have no real guidance from the NHS before the baby arrives. And then they have this quite arbitrary 6-week checkup where you go to the GP and it's quite rudimentary. It's a quick check on mum's mental well-being. Sometimes they do physical checks on, the vaginal canal and any scar if you've, had a C-section. But I've had a lot of clients who've never even had a physical exam. And essentially this is the supposed point when you are ready to exercise again. In my experience, not many women at 6 weeks postpartum feel in any way. Some very small minority do, but most women feel not in a position to exercise. And I think it's that 6-week point starts to create this culture of guilt where it's almost like, you're supposed to be ready to go. So then if you don't feel ready, a long period can then ensue where you're, as you say, you're confused or unclear on what to do. Okay. So the myth busting around the 6 weeks check I want to say is it really is not a natural time frame to be in a position to mentally and physically be ready to really find any routine with exercise. So see that as a good time to have a conversation with your GP about any physical symptoms that you might be experiencing. But do not in any way feel this is kind of your certificate that, you should from that point walk out and start Couch to 5K.
Right.
Because I think the healing process postpartum is a year.
Yes.
Anyway, we know that again from a kind of biological perspective. It's far longer than 6 weeks.
Yeah.
A couple of other myths again, which I think are quite unhelpful around that kind of postpartum period, is lots of poor advice around weight management and breastfeeding. So there's a lot of old wives' tales that if you breastfeed, you will just magically lose your baby weight, and it's this perfect solution for kind of bouncing back, which I have a huge issue with that phrase anyway, but if we just roll with that as a common myth. And actually, breastfeeding is a hugely physical process. It's very, very full on. And in my experience, there is no magic pill to weight loss. It is just calories in and calories coming out and your movement. So women who are breastfeeding, who are staying up, and doing night feeds and, being essentially on call 24/7 need fuel. And so actually, in some cases, it can mean that your weight either doesn't change or indeed increases postpartum because you need fuel for that process. And all I want to clarify on that is just whatever form of feeding you are doing for your child, it's about what's right for you and your baby. Do not feel any pressure to go down a certain route because a midwife or a family member or anyone has given you this advice that this is this sort of click your fingers and in a couple of months' time you'll be back in those jeans and it will all be a distant memory. Fit physically, and that's just not the case. Like I said, weight management is a complicated sort of flow between what you're doing movement wise, what's coming into your body, and finding that sort of balance. And the feeding journey is just not something that should be seen as a sort of quick fix aesthetic process. And I think it's really sad that women get very guilty, or I hear women sort of saying, oh gosh, I'm breastfeeding, I just can't seem to lose the weight. And it's just so sad to me because it's got so convoluted as, what away from the purpose of what it's supposed to achieve. So I think that's a big one. I think also in terms of the physical, you mentioned running and the physical healing process, it's very common to find some challenges with your pelvic floor initially, postpartum. And I would again give that at least 6 months. If you think about the process and the pressure on your pelvic floor of growing that child, it's been under pressure for an extended period of time. It's really important that you give your body time to recover and repair, and particularly in those few months postpartum, the most important thing you can do is some gentle pelvic floor exercises. Because sometimes if people ignore symptoms like leaking, bleeding, some of these kind of physical signs that things are still in healing mode and may even need further investigation. If you are somebody who is very fit and wants to get back out there, although it's frustrating and does require some patience, I'd really urge you to let that process heal and give yourself proper time and invest in, again, those foundations to get yourself to a place where absolutely running postpartum is a reality for lots of women. And it's, they get times that they've never got before. It's not the end of your fitness journey. It's actually lots of ways the beginning of a really exciting new chapter. But I think just making sure that you give yourself time, which comes back to the 6-week check-up point, it's going to take time. It's going to be ups and downs. It's not going to be linear. There's going to be new things that your body starts to do or changes that you see, and you need to kind of adapt the path. But I think on a myth-busting perspective, to round that off, if you feel that you should be running like you were before, cycling, doing your triathlons, doing your, your HIIT classes, just really ask yourself, do I physically have any feedback loops coming that are suggesting to me that I still need more time?
Yeah.
Or that I need to slightly adapt the movement that I'm doing without just autopilot going back at that 6-week point to pretty high impact training.
So you talked about feedback, but you don't want to kind of explore that a bit deeper. What do we mean by that? And then how can people implement that practically in their day-to-day?
So I think on the feedback loop point, I think what's something I hear a lot is, to your point about taking time for yourself, I think women feel very out of their own body at the end of pregnancy. So once the baby, during pregnancy, you're really tuned into the changes of the baby, the physical changes that you're going through each trimester. And then when the baby arrives, I think, as you say, in the kind of the fog, the process of just that huge seismic change, actually a lot of women have symptoms that they sort of either ignore or they don't even really notice because they are just not getting, the time or the headspace to connect with themselves. So the thing that you kind of, I guess step one, the thing I would love you to do is just taking a couple of minutes a day to just genuinely sitting with yourself, to be like, am I in any discomfort here? Am I getting, what's feeling good? What's feeling stronger? What's feeling a little bit niggly? And I think that honestly is the most powerful thing you can do to then be in a place to make decisions about what the next step should be. Because if you're sitting there and you are having some of these symptoms I've mentioned, some leaking, postpartum bleeding, don't get stung by a wasp.
Well, I want to be in the podcast.
And, I think then you can, get signposted to amazing resources like, of course, the Motherhood Clinic, and getting support and expertise. No matter what birth experience you've had, doing some sort of pelvic floor recovery is the most important sort of first step. Once you've done that assessment, and you feel that you're getting some feedback on yourself, there's a great NHS app that's totally free. It's called Squeezy. I recommend it to all of my community. Squeezy, you can download it, and it's got really good guided exercises just to kind of reconnect with all of those muscles. And then I guess understanding your why, so going back to what we've talked about at the beginning of this conversation, and then thinking about how you want to move what makes you excited again about movement. Do you need something more gentle, recovery? Do you need to mobilize your body? Are you really missing that sweat? Are you really dreaming of running again, or dreaming of doing squats, or whatever it is? And just giving yourself time, and time is the key thing to settle back into that. Don't rush it. Come up with a slow, controlled plan, and ask for help for that as well. So I think those would be my 3 things.
Excellent.
If that answers the question.
It does. Yeah, so hopefully we can round out with that, which is hopefully some clear, practical advice that people can take away from that. Good. Shall we round out there?
Thank you for having me.
Thank you. I think there's a further conversation which we'll get to, which I think is, we've talked very much in this conversation about why it's important and a bit of the what. The next question I think that most people will be thinking about would be about, how do I start building that habit? So I think that's probably a further conversation, but thank you for that.
Thank you for having me.
And we'll speak again.
Definitely.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Cheers.
Okay, perfect. How did we get on with time?
Okay.
I think, will tell me on here.
38 minutes.